Is this love, Agent Romanoff?
Love is for children. I owe him a debt.
Before the video starts, I want to give a quick update on the channel. The Zack Snyder video I mentioned in my Falcon/Invincible video is getting pushed to the back burner. The video is most likely going to be over an hour and 30 minutes long, so it'll be out when it's out. After this video, the next one is probably either going to be the Boba Fett character analysis video I mentioned in my Mando Season 2 video, or an analysis of the Bad Batch, because I'm not going to be able to condense my thoughts on it into a quick review. And on a final note, my 300 subscriber special will be coming out in August, and will probably have something to do with the Palpatine video. Anyways, now it's time to get into what you clicked on the video for. Also, of course...
You're spoiling it! You're spoiling everything!
Loki was really good. I'm reveling in the fact that the MCU shows that I had the lowest expectations for have turned out to be the ones that I've had the most fun with, while the only one I was genuinely interested in seeing disappointed me. I'm honestly surprised that I enjoyed Loki as much as I did, considering that back in my 3-part video on Avengers Endgame, I was pretty disparaging of the mere idea of this show. The show's biggest strength is that, to me at least, it's the first Phase 4 MCU show to fully deliver on the promise of its premise. WandaVision is a show about mystery and intrigue and loss, but its protagonist gets off with no permanent consequences or with ones that she can undo, and almost everything that takes place outside of the Hex isn't nearly as compelling as what happens inside it. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is a character-focused, racial/political drama that has really choppy writing for a good chunk of the characters, and is limited in how far it could go with its story because someone might make an internet about it. Loki is a weird show about characters doing things with wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff, and it's able to make everything in the show work. Unlike the other two, even the stuff that isn't the characters doing weird things is interesting to follow, which is pretty easy in this type of setting, but for these shows, it's a marked improvement. The writing is a lot more solid, and by the time the season ended, I didn't feel frustrated or confused about anything that important. The best part of the show overall is Loki himself. In that Endgame video, I said that I was bummed out at the prospect of Loki repeating his arc from the MCU, and while he kind of does repeat this arc, I think the show handles this much better than the MCU does. Giving Loki a redemption arc over the course of this season of the show gives a lot more time for him to reflect on his actions and learn how to love himself and others, and finally becoming a better person. Meanwhile, his arc in the MCU tends to boil down to other characters telling him to not be a bad person. Ragnarok is the only real time that he grows as a character, only for him to die immediately after. And I think that's mainly due to the fact of multiple creators having different ideas about what they should do with him. I think his romance with Sylvie is an interesting way to have a more literal example of Loki learning to love himself. And it's a neat idea, and their breakup at the end of the first season is a good tease of future development for both of them. I think Loki getting to experience someone stabbing him in the back firsthand was great as well. Sylvie is a great character, and I'm glad that she isn't just Loki but a woman. She is just as complicated and broken as Loki is, but she's still got a ways to go on her redemption. And since this show is getting a second season, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. The other Lokis are fun to follow for their single episode of the show, but outside of Richard Grant finally getting to be in a Disney property that isn't garbage, they're mainly just fun ideas who don't really add that much to the show outside of illustrating how messed up Loki can be as a character. I also think the side characters and villains were well done for a change. I like that even from the first episode of the show, the TVA has sinister undertones even before they're fully revealed to be the antagonists of the series. The scene where we see a dwarf full of Infinity Stones is a good visual indicator that the TVA is going to have much larger ramifications in the universe than a bunch of space rocks. I'm glad that Mobius is able to be his own character and have an interesting arc with Loki, and isn't just a vehicle for TVA scenes, like how the side characters in WandaVision are a vehicle for scenes in the real world. I like that there's no twist of Renslayer being evil the whole time, as rather a slow build from her being someone with a stick up their ass, to someone willing to overlook the flaws of the TVA because she benefits from the status quo. I like that even though the Timekeepers are revealed to be robots, it doesn't feel like a cheap twist, but instead raises the stakes of the show. Probably the best bit of writing for the show's villains is with He Who Remains. Even though he's only in the show for a single episode, he manages to raise the stakes for Phase 4. I think it was impressive that the show was able to stick the landing with keeping the TVA more morally gray, where you understood why they were evil, but why they did and why they thought it was the right thing to do. Before moving on, I think the most commendable thing about the first season is its ending. I'm so happy that it didn't end with a giant CGI battle. Instead, the focus was on Loki and Sylvie arguing about whether or not they should kill he who remains because of the possible ramifications. I have some small problems with the show, like some characters not being as fleshed out as they could be, or the really bizarre use of I need a hero, but we do have another season on the way, so they don't bother me as much if this had been a one and done deal like WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Overall, I would give the first season of Loki an 8 out of 10. Even though my thoughts on Loki changed drastically after I started watching it, my feelings on Black Widow remain unchanged after watching her movie. I still think that Black Widow is a bad character, though I now know that she was made the way she was as the result of the more toxic higher-ups of Marvel at the time. Even taking that into account, I wasn't expecting this movie to sell me on a version of the character that I haven't liked since 2015. I went into Black Widow with low expectations, so at least I wasn't massively disappointed with it. Surprisingly, I enjoyed all of the new characters that the movie introduced to the MCU. I think that Yelena, Red Guardian, and Melina were interesting people to follow, and I like the group's somewhat unconventional found family story, and that even though their family is just an undercover assignment from the glorious Soviet Union, they were still able to make a connection with each other. Even though he's a one-off threat, I think Dreykov is competently used in the movie. His exploitation of vulnerable women for his own personal gain through the Red Room and the Black Widow program is genuinely repulsive, and one of the few competent bits of writing for the film, even if it does come across as a bit on the nose at times. I also liked how they changed Taskmaster to work better with the movie's story. I think that having Black Widow fight someone who directly suffered from her past actions was really compelling. I thought the Red Room and the costume designs were pretty cool, I guess. But yeah, that's where the compliments end. My biggest complaint about the movie is that it feels unbelievably mean-spirited, and it really affected my experience with it. A lot of it is directed towards the character of Black Widow herself, and even though I enjoyed it because the movie was taking the piss out of a character I don't like, after a while I realized that the movie wasn't really doing anything other than this. Aside from the fact that all the movie really accomplishes is filling in some gaps between Civil War and Infinity War, Black Widow feels less like a story about Black Widow, and is more about the MCU trying to brush off the shitty ways they used her in the past. Like, hahaha, isn't it funny how over-sexualized Black Widow was in Iron Man 2? What if we had this be an ongoing joke throughout the film? Wow, I can't believe this was a thing.
Please don't remember that we wrote this character like a sex object for most of the movie she's in.
I like that a large part of this movie is focused on Natasha confronting the fact that she left her adopted sister behind, treating her found family really badly, and has her directly confronting her past. But a lot of the time it feels like this is taking a back seat to the movie winking at the sins of its predecessors. I cannot believe that people were harassing one of Loki's writers because they thought this movie had better writing. Yeah, remember, this is the movie that uses a pheromone shield in order to protect its villain. But yeah, sure, out of these two, this is clearly the better written one. That scene took me out of the movie completely and made me say, was this movie written by a man? Are you kidding me? Speaking of men, I think the movie was really mean to Red Guardian. This guy is really open and loving about his found family, and the movie takes every chance it can to take the piss out of him. Just let this guy actually be appreciated by his family instead of getting shit on by them every time he talks. Bizarrely enough, I think that Taskmaster should have died at the end of this movie. I've criticized the MCU in the past for setting up minor villains and then killing them off, but they're usually exactly like their comic book counterparts. Whereas with Taskmaster, the character was specifically changed to fit more organically into the movie's story. As it is, Black Widow and Taskmaster reconcile their differences way too easily at the end and it weakens one of the good bits of writing from the movie. The CGI also goes down in quality as the movie goes on, and most of the special effects in the finale look terrible. On a final note, the use of Smells Like Teen Spirit in the movie is somehow more bizarre and poorly used than I Need a Hero and Loki. If I wanted a sinister and dark cover of Smells Like Teen Spirit that was unironically amazing, I would just watch Pan. In the past, I've heard some people make the statement that Captain Marvel feels like a leftover from Phase 1, so I was expecting for this movie to feel like a leftover from Phase 2. Outside of some of the more competent bits of writing in it, Black Widow is exactly what I expected it to be. I may have some problems with Captain Marvel, but at least it made me feel emotions over it. Black Widow was a pretty mediocre movie, and in the words of a wise decapod, it is a movie that exists. If I had to give it a rating, I would give it a 4 out of 10, and even then I think that's a little generous.